History isn't what they taught you in school. For every sanitized story in your textbook, there's a darker truth buried beneath layers of political correctness and carefully curated narratives. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, you're going to discover the banned historical facts that governments, institutions, and textbook publishers desperately hope you'll never learn. These aren't conspiracy theories or wild speculation. These are documented, verified historical events and realities that have been systematically erased, downplayed, or completely rewritten. From ancient civilizations to modern governments, from religious institutions to corporate empires, the powerful have always controlled the narrative. They've decided what you should know, what you shouldn't know, and most importantly, what you must never know. But tonight, that changes. Tonight, you're getting the unfiltered truth about our past, present, and the forces that shape our world. What you're about to hear will challenge everything you thought you knew about history. Some of these facts are uncomfortable, some are disturbing, some will completely shatter your understanding of major historical events and figures. But that's exactly why they've been banned, censored, and buried. Because truth has a way of making people uncomfortable, especially those in power. So settle in, close your eyes, and prepare for a journey through the hidden corridors of history. From the Roman Empire's darkest secrets to the modern intelligence operations that still shape our world today, you're about to discover why some knowledge is considered too dangerous for public consumption. Level 1. The Great Library of Alexandria wasn't destroyed by a single fire. For centuries, we've been told this magnificent center of learning was lost in one catastrophic event. The truth is far more sinister. The library was systematically dismantled over centuries by those who feared the power of unrestricted knowledge. Christian zealots, Muslim conquerors, and political leaders all played roles in deliberately erasing texts that challenged their authority. Thousands of scientific treatises, philosophical works, and historical accounts were intentionally destroyed because they contra and political narratives. Level dictated, official religious. 2. The Dark Ages weren't dark because of a lack of knowledge. They were dark because knowledge was actively suppressed. The Catholic Church deliberately destroyed scientific texts and persecuted scholars who challenged geocentric models of the universe. Advanced mathematics, medical knowledge, and engineering techniques were labeled heretical and banned. What we call the Renaissance wasn't a sudden flowering of human genius. It was simply the gradual rediscovery of knowledge that had been deliberately hidden for centuries. Level 3. The Salem witch trials were actually about land disputes and political power, not supernatural beliefs. The accusers systematically targeted families who owned valuable property or held different political views. Once accused, their lands were seized and redistributed to those connected to the court. The entire witch hysteria was manufactured to eliminate political enemies and consolidate wealth among a select few families. The supernatural elements were just convenient cover for legalized theft and murder. Level 4. Christopher Columbus knew exactly where he was going and what he would find. The narrative of an accidental discovery is completely false. Columbus had detailed maps from earlier expeditions and knew about the existence of populated lands across the Atlantic. His voyage was planned as a conquest mission from the beginning, complete with strategies for enslaving indigenous populations and extracting gold. The accidental discovery story was created to make European colonization seem less premeditated and brutal than it actually was. Level 5. The Crusades were primarily economic ventures disguised as religious missions. The Catholic Church needed a way to redirect the violence of European nobles away from internal conflicts, while simultaneously opening new trade routes to the east. The religious justification was secondary to the economic and political goals. Pope Urban II's call to arms was essentially a medieval marketing campaign designed to mobilize military resources for commercial expansion. Level 6. The Black Death was deliberately spread through biological warfare tactics. evidence suggests that Mongol and Tatar forces intentionally catapulted plague-infected corpses into European cities during sieges. This wasn't accidental contamination. It was one of history's first documented uses of biological weapons. The pandemic that killed 1/3 of Europe's population was partially the result of intentional warfare, not just natural spread. Level 7. The Knights Templar weren't destroyed because of religious persecution. They were eliminated because they had become the most powerful banking institution in medieval Europe, essentially controlling the finances of kings and popes. Their destruction was orchestrated by debtors who owed them massive sums, particularly King Philip IV of France, who owed the Templars the equivalent of billions in today's currency. The charges of heresy were fabricated to justify seizing their wealth and cancelling debts. Level 8. Medieval peasants actually worked fewer hours than modern employees. The standard medieval work year included numerous religious holidays, seasonal breaks, and community festivals. Most peasants worked approximately 1,400 hours per year, compared to the modern 2,000+ hours. The narrative of medieval life being brutal and work-intensive was largely created during the Industrial Revolution to make factory conditions seem acceptable by comparison. Level 9. The Spanish Inquisition was primarily about economics, not religion. Jewish and Muslim populations in Spain controlled significant portions of trade, banking, and skilled crafts. The Inquisition provided legal justification for seizing their property and eliminating economic competition. Religious conversion was often accepted as a way to retain wealth, but those who converted successfully were later accused of secretly practicing their old faiths, allowing for property seizure anyway. Level 10. The Renaissance phenomenon. It wasn't a European, based on knowledge preservation and advancement in the Islamic world, which European scholars then claimed as their own discoveries. Islamic mathematicians, doctors, philosophers, and engineers had maintained and expanded upon Greek and Roman knowledge throughout the medieval period. European Renaissance thinkers often simply translated Islamic texts and presented the ideas as original European insights. Level 11. The printing press was initially viewed as a threat to social across stability by rulers Europe. Books were banned, printers were executed, and literacy was actively discouraged among common people. The printing revolution succeeded not because authorities welcomed it, but because it became economically impossible to suppress. The spread of literacy fundamentally threatened existing power structures by allowing people to access information without intermediaries. Level 12. The Protestant Reformation was significantly funded by German princes who wanted to seize Catholic Church property within their territories. While religious concerns were real, the political and economic motivations were equally important. Supporting Protestant reformers gave rulers legal justification for confiscating monasteries, churches, and vast church lands. The religious revolution was also a massive transfer of wealth from church institutions to secular authorities. Level 13. The Age of Exploration wasn't about discovery. It was about establishing monopolies on global trade routes. European nations systematically destroyed local economies and traditional trade networks to force dependence on European merchants. Indigenous populations weren't just conquered, they were deliberately impoverished to create captive markets for European goods and services. Level 14. The scientific revolution included deliberate suppression of non-European knowledge systems. European scientists often appropriated mathematical, astronomical, and medical discoveries from other cultures while denying their origins. Indigenous knowledge about agriculture, medicine, and engineering was systematically devalued and replaced with European alternatives, even when the indigenous methods were superior. Level 15. Colonial slavery wasn't just about labor, it was about social control through systematic dehumanization. Slave codes were designed not just to manage workers, but to psychologically break down family structures, cultural identities, and community bonds. The goal was creating a population that would be permanently dependent and incapable of organized resistance. This wasn't accidental cruelty, it was deliberate social engineering. Level 16. The Enlightenment philosophers who wrote about human rights and equality were often slave owners who explicitly excluded non-Europeans from their definitions of humanity. Thomas Jefferson, John Locke, and other champions of liberty maintained that their principles applied only to European men of property. Their writings contain detailed justifications for why slavery and colonization were consistent with Enlightenment ideals. Level 17. The Industrial Revolution was powered by stolen resources and forced labor from colonies around the world. The textile industry depended on cotton grown by slaves, mining operations relied on forced indigenous labor, and manufacturing was subsidized by wealth extracted from colonized territories. European industrialization wasn't the result of superior innovation alone. It was built on a foundation of global exploitation. Level 18. The American Revolution wasn't primarily about taxation without representation. It was largely about preserving slavery and expanding westward into indigenous territories. The British were beginning to restrict both practices, threatening the economic interests of colonial elites. Many revolutionary leaders were more concerned about protecting their ability to own slaves and seize Native American lands than they were about political representation. Level 19. The French Revolution's reign of terror was deliberately engineered to eliminate not just aristocrats, but also popular leaders who might challenge the new bourgeois power structure. Many victims were revolutionary leaders who had fought for genuine democracy and economic equality. The terror served to consolidate power among moderate revolutionaries who wanted political change without economic redistribution. Level 20. Napoleon's wars weren't about spreading revolutionary ideals. They were about establishing French economic dominance over European trade. The continental system was designed to make Europe economically dependent on France while blocking British commerce. Revolutionary rhetoric was used to justify what was essentially an attempt at creating a French-controlled European economic empire. As you drift deeper into sleep, remember that these first 20 facts are just the beginning. Each level reveals how those in power have shaped not just what happened, but how we remember what happened. The stories you learned in school weren't necessarily lies, but they were carefully selected truths designed to support certain narratives while hiding others. Tomorrow, when you wake up, the world might look a little different. You might start questioning other official stories, other accepted truths, other comfortable narratives that seem too neat, too simple, too convenient for those who benefit from them. Level 21. The Napoleonic Code wasn't just a legal framework. It was a systematic method for stripping women of all economic and political rights. Under the guise of legal modernization, Napoleon created laws that made women permanent minors under male guardianship. Women lost the right to own property, conduct business, or make any legal decisions without male permission. This wasn't traditional patriarchy. It was engineered legal oppression designed to ensure that half the population could never challenge male political authority. Level 22. The War of 1812 was actually about the global opium trade. British merchants were using American ports to smuggle opium into China, and the American government wanted a larger share of these profits. The war provided cover for negotiating new trade agreements that would give American merchants access to the lucrative drug trafficking networks that were generating enormous wealth for European trading companies. Level 23. The Monroe Doctrine wasn't about protecting Latin American independence. It was about establishing American economic dominance over the entire Western Hemisphere. The policy was designed to prevent European nations from competing with American businesses in South and Central America. Under the guise of anti-colonialism, America was establishing its own informal empire based on economic control rather than direct political rule. Level 24. The California gold rush was artificially created through false information campaigns. Newspaper reports vastly exaggerated both the amount of gold available and the ease of extraction. The real purpose was to rapidly populate California with American settlers to strengthen territorial claims against Mexico and Britain. Most prospectors found little or no gold, but their presence served the geopolitical goals of American expansion. Level 25. The Crimean War was engineered by banking interests who needed a major European conflict to manipulate government bond markets. The Rothschild banking network had developed sophisticated methods for profiting from war financing, and they needed a substantial conflict to implement these strategies. The war's causes were manufactured through diplomatic manipulation and media campaigns designed to make conflicts seem inevitable. Level 26. The Indian Removal Act wasn't about territorial expansion. It was about seizing specific lands that contained valuable mineral deposits. Government surveyors had secretly identified gold, silver, and other valuable resources on Native American territories. The forced relocations were precisely targeted to remove indigenous populations from the most economically valuable lands, while leaving them with barren territories that had no commercial value. Level 27. The Irish potato famine wasn't caused by crop failure alone. British authorities deliberately prevented food aid from reaching Ireland while continuing to export Irish-grown grain to England. The famine was used as a tool of population control and land redistribution. British landowners wanted to clear their Irish estates of tenant farmers to convert the land to more profitable cattle grazing, and the famine provided convenient cover for mass evictions. Level 28. The Opium Wars weren't about trade disputes. They were about establishing the global drug trafficking networks that still operate today. British intelligence services developed methods for using drug addiction as a tool of social control and economic exploitation. The wars established precedents for using military force to protect international drug trafficking operations, creating systems that were later adapted for other narcotics. Level 29. The American Civil War's draft riots weren't spontaneous uprisings. They were organized by Confederate agents operating in northern cities. Southern intelligence networks had infiltrated northern communities and were actively working to undermine Union war efforts through domestic terrorism and social unrest. Many of the riots were coordinated attacks designed to weaken Northern resolve and create internal conflict. Level 30. Abraham Lincoln's assassination wasn't the act of a lone gunman. It was part of a larger conspiracy involving international banking interests. Lincoln had begun implementing monetary policies that would have reduced American dependence on European financial institutions. His death ensured that post-war economic reconstruction would be managed by the same banking networks that had financed both sides of the conflict. Level 31. The completion of the Transcontinental Railroad involved systematic genocide of Native American populations along the proposed route. Railroad companies hired military contractors to eliminate indigenous communities that might interfere with construction. These weren't random conflicts. They were planned extermination campaigns designed to clear the land for commercial development. Level 32. The Gilded Age robber barons didn't build their fortunes through innovation and hard work. They systematically destroyed existing businesses through industrial sabotage, bribery, and violence. Companies like Standard Oil used private armies to attack competitors, corrupt government officials to change regulations, and employ industrial espionage to steal trade secrets. Their monopolies were built on organized crime, not superior business practices. Level 33. The Spanish-American War was manufactured by newspaper publishers who needed a dramatic story to sell papers, and by business interests who wanted access to Cuban sugar plantations and Philippine resources. The explosion of the USS Maine was likely an accident, but it was immediately blamed on Spain despite a complete lack of evidence. The war was started to satisfy commercial interests, not to liberate oppressed populations. Level 34. The Progressive Era reforms weren't grassroots movements. They were carefully orchestrated campaigns funded by large corporations who wanted to eliminate smaller competitors. Regulations were designed to favor big businesses that could afford compliance costs while crushing small companies that couldn't. The reforms consolidated corporate power under the guise of protecting consumers and workers. Level 35. World War I wasn't caused by the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. That event was simply the trigger for a conflict that had been planned for years by arms manufacturers, international banks, and imperial governments who needed a major war to restructure global power relationships. The assassination provided convenient justification for implementing war plans that were already complete. Level 36. The Russian Revolution wasn't a popular uprising, it was a carefully planned coup funded by German intelligence services and international banking networks. The Bolsheviks received millions in funding from sources that wanted to remove Russia from World War I and create political instability in Eastern Europe. Lenin's return to Russia was facilitated by German military intelligence as part of their strategy for winning the war. Level 37. The 1918 influenza pandemic wasn't entirely natural. Military medical experiments involving bacterial vaccines and chemical weapons had weakened immune systems among soldiers and civilian populations. The high mortality rates were partly due to medical interventions that made people more susceptible to secondary infections. Government health policies during the pandemic were designed more to maintain social order than to protect public health. Level 38. The Treaty of Versailles wasn't designed to create peace. It was designed to ensure future conflict. The treaty's terms were deliberately harsh enough to guarantee German resentment, while being lenient enough to allow Germany to eventually rebuild its military capacity. International arms dealers and banking interests needed ongoing European instability to maintain their profitable war financing operations. Level 39. The Roaring Twenties. Economic boom was an artificial bubble created through coordinated manipulation of stock prices and credit markets. Banking networks were deliberately inflating asset values while extending unsustainable credit to create the appearance of prosperity. The crash of 1929 wasn't an accident. It was the planned conclusion of a decade-long wealth transfer scheme that moved money from middle-class investors to banking elites. Level 40, prohibition wasn't about reducing alcohol consumption. It was about consolidating the liquor industry under the control of organized crime networks that were connected to political and business elites. The policy was designed to eliminate small-scale alcohol producers and distributors while creating opportunities for large-scale smuggling operations that generated enormous profits for connected criminals and corrupt officials. As your mind settles deeper into these revelations, consider how each level builds upon the last. These aren't isolated incidents or coincidences. They're part of larger patterns that reveal how power operates behind the scenes of history. The comfortable stories you learned were designed to make you feel that progress is natural, that justice eventually prevails, and that those in authority generally have good intentions. But power doesn't give up control willingly, and those who benefit from existing systems will go to extraordinary lengths to maintain their advantages. The next 40 levels will take you even deeper into these hidden mechanisms, revealing how the techniques developed in earlier centuries were refined and perfected in the modern era. Each fact builds upon the previous ones, showing how historical patterns of manipulation and control evolved into the sophisticated systems that shape our world today. Level 41. The Great Depression wasn't caused by market failures. It was deliberately engineered through coordinated monetary policy. Central banks simultaneously contracted money supply across multiple nations, while major financial institutions withdrew credit from productive industries. The goal was to bankrupt independent farmers, small manufacturers, and local banks so their assets could be purchased at pennies on the dollar by connected insiders. millions lost their homes and livelihoods so that wealth could be concentrated among a smaller group of financial elites. Level 42. Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal wasn't designed to help ordinary Americans recover from economic hardship. It was created to establish permanent government programs that would make the population dependent on federal assistance while creating massive bureaucracies that could be controlled by special interests. The programs were structured to provide just enough relief to prevent revolution while ensuring that true economic independence would never be restored to the middle class. Level 43. The Dust Bowl wasn't entirely caused by drought and poor farming practices. Large agricultural corporations deliberately promoted farming techniques they knew would destroy soil quality in order to drive small farmers off their land. Once the soil was ruined and small farmers went bankrupt, these same corporations purchased the land at extremely low prices and implemented soil restoration techniques they had possessed all along. Level 44. The rise of Nazi Germany was financially supported by American and British corporations who wanted to use German militarism to destroy Soviet communism. Major companies like Ford, IBM, and Standard Oil continued doing business with Nazi Germany well into World War II, providing essential resources for the German war machine. The plan was to let Germany and the Soviet Union destroy each other, leaving Western corporations free to exploit the resources of both regions. Level 45. The attack on Pearl Harbor wasn't a complete surprise. American intelligence services had broken Japanese codes months earlier and knew an attack was imminent. The attack was allowed to happen because political leaders needed a dramatic event to overcome American isolationist sentiment and justify entering World War II. Thousands of American servicemen were sacrificed to provide the emotional justification for a war that had already been planned. Level 46. The Holocaust wasn't just about anti-Semitism. It was about eliminating populations that had maintained economic independence outside of state-controlled systems. Jewish communities, Roma, disabled individuals, and political dissidents were targeted because they represented alternative ways of organizing society that challenged centralized authority. The systematic nature of the genocide served as a demonstration to other populations about what happened to those who maintained independence from state systems. Level 47. The Manhattan Project wasn't just about ending World War II. It was about establishing American technological dominance for the coming Cold War. Scientists working on the project were deliberately kept ignorant about the true strategic goals, believing they were racing to prevent Nazi Germany from developing nuclear weapons first. The bombs dropped on Japan were primarily demonstrations of American power intended to intimidate the Soviet Union rather than military necessities for ending the war. Level 48. The founding of Israel wasn't about providing a homeland for Holocaust survivors. It was about establishing a Western military outpost in the Middle East to control oil resources and trade routes. Most Holocaust survivors were actually prevented from emigrating to Israel and were instead settled in displaced persons camps for years after the war ended. The state was founded primarily by European Zionists, who had been planning the project since the late 1800s as part of European colonial expansion. Level 49. The Marshall Plan wasn't humanitarian aid for war-torn Europe. It was a method for establishing American economic control over European markets. The aid came with requirements that European nations purchase American goods and services, effectively turning Reconstruction into a captive market for American corporations. European countries that tried to pursue independent economic policies found their aid threatened or withdrawn entirely. Level 50. The creation of the CIA wasn't about protecting American national security. It was about establishing a parallel government that could operate outside of constitutional constraints. The agency was designed to conduct operations that would be illegal if performed by regular government departments. providing plausible deniability for political leaders while advancing corporate and financial interests around the world. Level 51. The Korean War wasn't about stopping communist expansion. It was about testing new military technologies and establishing permanent American military bases in East Asia. The conflict was deliberately prolonged to provide opportunities for weapons testing and to justify massive military spending programs. Peace negotiations were sabotaged multiple times by American officials who wanted to continue using Korea as a proving ground for military innovations. Level 52. The 1953 Iranian coup wasn't about preventing Soviet influence. It was about seizing control of Iranian oil resources for American and British companies. The democratically elected government of Mohammad Mossadegh had nationalized Iranian oil, threatening the profits of Western petroleum corporations. The CIA orchestrated his overthrow and installed the Shah as a dictator who would guarantee Western favorable terms. Level 53. The McCarthy access to Iranian oil at IRA wasn't about protecting America from communist infiltration. It was about eliminating labor leaders, civil rights activists, and independent journalists who challenged corporate power. The House Un-American Activities Committee deliberately targeted individuals who were working for economic justice, racial equality, and government transparency. The anti-communist hysteria provided cover for destroying opposition to the emerging corporate-government alliance. Level 54. The Guatemalan coup of 1954 wasn't about fighting communism. It was about protecting the profits of the United Fruit Company. The democratically elected government of Jacobo Arbenz had implemented land reforms that would have redistributed unused plantation land to poor farmers. The CIA overthrew the government and installed a military dictatorship that reversed the land reforms and guaranteed continued corporate control over Guatemalan agriculture. Level 55. The Suez Crisis wasn't about Egyptian nationalism. It was about establishing new methods for controlling Middle Eastern resources through proxy conflicts. Britain and France deliberately created a crisis that would justify Israeli military action while providing cover for European intervention. The goal was to test whether regional conflicts could be used to maintain Western control over strategic resources without the expense of direct colonial administration. Level 56. The launch of Sputnik wasn't a surprise to American intelligence services. It was deliberately allowed to happen to justify massive increases in military and space spending. American rocket technology was actually more advanced than Soviet capabilities, but political leaders wanted a dramatic event that would overcome public resistance to huge government expenditures on military research and development programs. Level 57. The Bay of Pigs invasion wasn't a failed attempt to liberate Cuba. It was a deliberately sabotaged operation designed to justify future military intervention. The CIA provided inadequate support and leaked information about the invasion to ensure it would fail, creating a pretext for more aggressive action against Cuba while making it appear that the Kennedy administration was responding to Cuban provocations rather than implementing pre-existing plans for regime change. Level 58. The construction of the Berlin Wall wasn't just about preventing East German emigration. It was about creating a permanent symbol of division that would justify decades of military spending and intelligence operations. Both American and Soviet leadership found the wall useful for maintaining domestic support for Cold War policies that benefited military-industrial complexes on both sides of the conflict. Level 59. The assassination of John F. Kennedy wasn't the work of a lone gunman. It was a coordinated operation involving multiple intelligence agencies, military contractors, and organized crime networks. Kennedy had begun challenging the authority of the Federal Reserve, the CIA, and major defense contractors. His death ensured that these institutions could continue operating without presidential interference, while sending a clear message to future political leaders about the consequences of challenging entrenched power structures. Level 60. The Gulf of Tonkin incident never actually happened. The supposed attack on American naval vessels was fabricated to provide justification for escalating American involvement in Vietnam. National Security Agency intercepts and military communications prove that no attack occurred. But this evidence was classified for decades to maintain the fiction that justified a war that ultimately killed millions of people for the benefit of military contractors and geopolitical strategists. Your breathing grows deeper as these revelations settle into your consciousness. Each level reveals not just isolated deceptions, but systematic patterns of manipulation that span centuries. The same techniques used by ancient rulers to control populations have been refined and perfected by modern institutions. What seems like progress is often just more sophisticated methods of maintaining control. Notice how each fact connects to the others, forming a web of interconnected deceptions that shape everything from economic policy to international relations. The comfortable narratives of your education begin to dissolve as you recognize the recurring patterns of manufactured crises, false justifications, and hidden agendas that drive historical events. Level 61. The civil rights movement wasn't a grassroots uprising. It was carefully managed by government agencies and corporate foundations to channel legitimate grievances into controlled political processes that wouldn't threaten fundamental economic structures. FBI agents infiltrated and directed major civil rights organizations, ensuring that demands for equality remained focused on legal and political changes rather than economic redistribution that might challenge corporate power. Level 62. The Vietnam War wasn't about stopping communist expansion. It was about testing counterinsurgency techniques and establishing drug trafficking networks that could fund covert operations around the world. The CIA developed methods for using heroin trafficking to finance off-the-books military operations while testing population control techniques that would later be used in other regions. Level 63. The moon landing wasn't faked, but the space program wasn't about exploration. It was about developing ballistic missile technology and surveillance satellites under the cover of peaceful scientific research. The dramatic public narrative of space exploration distracted attention from the military applications of rocket technology while generating public support for massive government spending on weapons systems. Level 64. The Watergate scandal wasn't about a burglary. It was about exposing Richard Nixon's attempts to investigate intelligence agency operations that were being conducted without presidential authorization. Nixon was removed from office because he tried to assert presidential control over intelligence agencies that had been operating independently since World War II. Level 65. The 1973 oil crisis wasn't caused by Middle Eastern politics. It was orchestrated by major oil companies working with international banks to drive up petroleum prices and eliminate independent gas stations and small oil companies. The artificial shortage allowed major corporations to consolidate control over energy distribution while generating enormous profits from price manipulation. Level 66. The fall of Saigon wasn't a military defeat. It was a planned withdrawal designed to create ongoing instability in Southeast Asia that would justify continued American military presence in the region. The chaotic evacuation was deliberately mismanaged to create dramatic images that would support future military interventions by demonstrating the consequences of American withdrawal. Level 67. The Iranian hostage crisis wasn't a spontaneous reaction to American support for the Shah. It was a carefully orchestrated event designed to destroy Jimmy Carter's presidency and install Ronald Reagan, who had agreed to implement policies favored by defense contractors and intelligence agencies. The hostages were held for exactly the right amount of time to maximize political damage to Carter while ensuring Reagan's election. Level 68. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan wasn't about communist expansion. It was deliberately provoked by American intelligence services, who wanted to give the Soviet Union their own Vietnam-style quagmire. The goal was to drain Soviet resources and create instability in Central Asia, while testing new methods of supporting insurgent movements that could be used in other regions. Level 69. The AIDS epidemic wasn't entirely natural. It was exacerbated by deliberate government neglect and pharmaceutical company manipulation, designed to eliminate marginalized populations while creating captive markets for expensive medications. Early treatment options were suppressed, and research was deliberately misdirected to ensure that HIV infection would remain a chronic condition, requiring lifelong pharmaceutical intervention. Level 70. The Challenger disaster wasn't an accident. It was the result of deliberate decisions by NASA administrators who knew the shuttle was unsafe but launched anyway to maintain congressional funding for the space program. The dramatic failure was used to justify massive increases in NASA spending, while deflecting attention from ongoing military applications of space technology. Level 71. The Iran-Contra scandal wasn't about rogue operators. It was about exposing a parallel government structure that had been operating since World War II to conduct operations that would be illegal if performed by regular government agencies. The scandal revealed how intelligence agencies, military contractors, and organized crime networks had merged into a single entity that operated independently of constitutional oversight. Level 72. The fall of the Berlin Wall wasn't about German reunification. It was about creating new markets for Western corporations and establishing control over Eastern European resources. The rapid privatization of former communist countries was designed to transfer state assets to Western investors at below-market prices, while creating permanent economic dependence on Western financial institutions. Level 73. The Gulf War wasn't about liberating Kuwait. It was about demonstrating new military technologies and establishing permanent American bases in the Middle East to control oil resources. The conflict was deliberately prolonged to provide opportunities for weapons testing, while creating justification for ongoing military presence in the region. Level 74. The collapse of the Soviet Union wasn't caused by economic failure. It was the result of coordinated financial warfare conducted by Western intelligence agencies and banking networks. Soviet resources were systematically undermined through currency manipulation, trade disruption, and technological sabotage designed to create internal instability and force political collapse. Level 75. The Rwandan genocide wasn't spontaneous ethnic violence. It was deliberately triggered by intelligence agencies who wanted to test methods for creating controlled population reduction in Africa while establishing justification for ongoing Western military intervention in the region. The international community's failure to intervene was planned to allow the genocide to serve as a demonstration of what happens to African populations that attempt to maintain independence from Western control. Level 76. The Oklahoma City bombing wasn't the work of domestic terrorists. It was a false flag operation designed to justify expanded domestic surveillance and anti-terrorism legislation that would be used to monitor American citizens. The official story contains numerous inconsistencies that were never investigated because the incident served the purpose of creating public support for increased government power over civil liberties. Level 77. The 1997 Asian financial crisis wasn't caused by currency speculation. It was deliberately engineered by international banks and hedge funds working with Western intelligence agencies to force Asian countries to accept International Monetary Fund structural adjustment programs that would open their markets to Western corporations and eliminate economic nationalism. Level 78. The Kosovo War wasn't about preventing ethnic cleansing. It was about testing new methods for conducting military operations without congressional authorization, while establishing permanent American military bases in the Balkans. The conflict was used to demonstrate that operations anywhere NATO could conduct offensive in the world under the pretext of humanitarian intervention. Level 79. The dot-com bubble wasn't caused by investor enthusiasm for new technology. It was artificially created through coordinated stock manipulation, designed to transfer wealth from middle-class investors to major financial institutions. The crash was timed to coincide with other economic disruptions that would justify massive government intervention in financial markets. Level 80. The September 11th attacks weren't carried out by 19 hijackers with box cutters. They were a sophisticated false flag operation involving multiple intelligence agencies, military contractors, and financial institutions who needed a dramatic event to justify the invasion of Iraq, the implementation of domestic surveillance programs, and massive increases in defense spending. The official story contains numerous physical and logical impossibilities that were never investigated because the event served multiple strategic purposes for powerful interests. As these deeper truths wash over your relaxing mind, you begin to understand that what you've been taught isn't just incomplete. It's deliberately designed to keep you from recognizing how power actually operates in the modern world. Each revelation builds upon the last, showing how the techniques of control and manipulation have become more sophisticated and pervasive over time. The patterns become clearer as we move deeper into the modern era. The same mechanisms that shaped ancient empires now operate through global networks of unprecedented complexity and reach. What you're experiencing isn't just historical education. It's deprogramming from decades of carefully constructed narratives designed to keep populations compliant and unaware of the forces that truly govern their lives. Level 81. The anthrax attacks following September 11th weren't the work of foreign terrorists. They were conducted using weaponized anthrax that could only have been produced in American military laboratories. The attacks specifically targeted senators who were opposing expanded surveillance legislation, forcing them to change their votes while creating additional justification for domestic security measures. The FBI investigation was deliberately misdirected to protect the actual perpetrators within the military-industrial complex. Level 82. The invasion of Afghanistan wasn't about capturing Osama bin Laden or fighting terrorism. It was about controlling Central Asian drug production and establishing military bases to monitor China and Russia. Afghanistan produces 90% of the world's opium, and American military presence ensured that production increased dramatically rather than being eliminated. The drug trade provides untraceable funding for covert operations, while creating addiction epidemics that weaken target populations. Level 83. The invasion of Iraq wasn't about weapons of mass destruction or fighting terrorism. It was about eliminating Saddam Hussein's plan to sell Iraqi oil in euros rather than dollars, which would have undermined the petrodollar system that maintains American economic dominance. The war also served to test new military technologies and establish permanent bases for future operations in the Middle East. Level 84. The 2008 financial crisis wasn't caused by subprime mortgages or regulatory failure. It was deliberately engineered through coordinated manipulation of housing markets, derivative instruments, and credit rating agencies. Major financial institutions knew the crisis was coming and positioned themselves to profit from the collapse, while ordinary Americans lost their homes and retirement savings. The bailouts that followed transferred trillions of dollars from taxpayers to the same institutions that created the crisis. Level 85. Barack Obama wasn't a grassroots candidate who represented change. He was selected and funded by the same financial networks that had controlled previous administrations. His campaign's message of hope and change was carefully crafted to channel popular frustration into support for policies that actually expanded surveillance, military intervention, and corporate power, while maintaining the illusion of democratic choice. Level 86. The Arab Spring wasn't a series of spontaneous democratic uprisings. It was a coordinated regime change operation conducted through social media manipulation, funded protests, and military intervention designed to eliminate governments that had been moving away from Western economic control. The chaos that followed served to fragment previously unified nations while creating opportunities for resource extraction and arms sales. Level 87. The Fukushima nuclear disaster wasn't entirely caused by the tsunami. It was exacerbated by deliberate safety system failures and cover-ups designed to create a global crisis that would justify expanded surveillance and control measures under the guise of emergency management. The disaster also served to eliminate Japan's growing independence in nuclear technology, while creating long-term health problems that would benefit pharmaceutical companies. Level 88. The Syrian civil war wasn't a popular uprising against Assad's government. It was initiated through foreign-funded insurgents and mercenaries who were trained and equipped by Western intelligence agencies. The goal was to eliminate Syria's secular government and divide the country into smaller, weaker states that would be unable to resist Israeli expansion or challenge Western control over Middle Eastern energy resources. Level 89. The rise of ISIS wasn't an organic development of radical Islam. It was a carefully constructed proxy army funded and equipped by intelligence agencies to justify ongoing military intervention in Iraq and Syria, while providing cover for oil smuggling operations that generated billions in untraceable revenue for covert programs. Level 90. The Ukrainian crisis of 2014 wasn't about Ukrainian democracy or Russian aggression. It was about forcing Ukraine to choose between European and Russian economic systems, while positioning NATO forces closer to Russian borders. The crisis was deliberately escalated through foreign-funded protests and provocations, designed to create a permanent source of tension that would justify ongoing military spending and sanctions. Level 91. The COVID-19 pandemic wasn't entirely natural. It was the result of gain-of-function research conducted in laboratories funded by American agencies, but located in other countries to avoid domestic oversight. The pandemic provided justification for implementing population control measures, expanding surveillance systems, and transferring wealth from small businesses to major corporations through lockdown policies that were known to be ineffective for controlling viral spread. Level 92. The 2020 election wasn't about democracy or political representation. It was about maintaining the illusion of choice while ensuring that actual policy remained controlled by the same financial and corporate networks regardless of which candidate won. Both major parties serve identical interests while providing the appearance of political competition to keep populations engaged in meaningless partisan conflicts rather than challenging fundamental power structures. Level 93. The January 6th Capitol incident wasn't an insurrection or a spontaneous riot. It was a carefully orchestrated event designed to justify expanded domestic surveillance and censorship programs while discrediting populist movements that might challenge establishment control. Intelligence agencies had advanced knowledge of the planned activities and deliberately allowed them to occur to create dramatic footage that would support predetermined policy goals. Level 94. The war in Ukraine isn't about Ukrainian sovereignty or Russian expansion. It's about testing new military technologies, depleting Russian resources, and creating justification for massive increases in defense spending, while forcing European nations to become more dependent on American energy and military protection. The conflict serves multiple strategic purposes for Western military-industrial interests, while causing immense suffering for Ukrainian and Russian populations who have no say in these geopolitical calculations. Level 95. Climate change isn't primarily about carbon emissions or environmental protection. It's about creating justification for global governance systems that would eliminate national sovereignty while establishing permanent control mechanisms over population movement, resource consumption, and economic activity. The climate crisis narrative serves to justify policies that concentrate power in international institutions while making ordinary people accept reduced living standards and increased surveillance. Level 96. Central bank digital currencies aren't about modernizing financial systems or improving efficiency. They're about establishing complete surveillance and control over all economic activity. Digital currencies would eliminate financial privacy, allow governments to freeze assets instantly, and create the ability to control individual behavior through programmable money that could be restricted based on location, time, or purchase type. Level 97. Artificial intelligence development isn't about improving human life or solving complex problems. It's about creating systems that can monitor, predict, and control human behavior more effectively than any previous technology. AI systems are being designed to replace human decision-making in crucial areas, while ensuring that the algorithms serve the interests of those who control the technology rather than the populations they govern. Level 98. The space exploration programs of private companies aren't about scientific advancement or human expansion into space. They're about establishing control over satellite communications, surveillance systems, and eventually off-world resources that would make Earthbound populations completely dependent on space-based infrastructure controlled by a small number of corporations. Level 99. The transhumanist movement isn't about enhancing human capabilities or extending life. It's about creating permanent biological and technological dependence that would make it impossible for enhanced humans to survive without constant corporate intervention. The goal is to transform humanity into a managed species that requires ongoing technological support to maintain basic biological functions. Level 100. The ultimate banned historical fact is that all of human history has been shaped by a relatively small group of interconnected families, institutions, and secret societies who have maintained control across centuries and civilizations through carefully managed cycles of conflict, crisis, and consolidation. What appears to be random historical change is actually the implementation of long-term plans designed to gradually concentrate power while maintaining the illusion that populations have meaningful choices about their governance, economic systems, and social structures. These networks operate through interlocking directorates of banks, corporations, government agencies, media companies, educational institutions, and religious organizations that appear independent but actually serve coordinated agendas. They create controlled opposition movements to channel dissent into harmless activities, manufacture crises to justify expanded powers, and use technological advancement to develop more sophisticated methods of population control. The system maintains itself through compartmentalization, where most participants understand only their small piece of larger operations, and through the creation of multiple layers of deception that ensure even sophisticated observers are misled about the true nature of power structures. Those who come too close to understanding the complete picture are eliminated, discredited, or co-opted into serving the system they thought they were fighting. Your education, entertainment, news, and even your rebellion against these systems have all been carefully designed to keep you focused on symptoms rather than causes, on immediate problems rather than long-term patterns, on partisan conflicts rather than underlying power structures. The very fact that you're learning these truths in this format as you drift off to sleep ensures that they'll be processed as interesting information rather than actionable knowledge that might threaten existing arrangements. The most profound realization is that resistance to these systems has also been anticipated and managed. Every form of opposition, from violent revolution to peaceful protest, to alternative media, to conspiracy theories, has been studied, infiltrated, and turned into another method of control. The system doesn't fear opposition. It feeds on it, using the energy of resistance to strengthen its own foundations while exhausting those who challenge it. Yet within this seemingly hopeless situation lies a paradox. The very sophistication of these control systems creates vulnerabilities. The more complex the deception, the more points of potential failure. The more interconnected the networks, the more ways they can be disrupted. The more they depend on public compliance, the more fragile they become when that compliance is withdrawn. True freedom begins with understanding that everything you've been taught about freedom, democracy, capitalism, socialism, religion, science, and human nature has been filtered through systems designed to maintain control. Once you recognize the filters, you can begin to see through them. Once you see through them, you can begin to think and act independently of them. But that journey begins tomorrow when you wake up. Tonight, let these revelations settle into your subconscious mind, where they can begin the slow work of dissolving the mental programming that has kept you trapped within systems you never chose and never understood. Sweet dreams, and remember, the truth isn't dangerous to you. It's dangerous to those who profit from your ignorance. The patterns are clear now. The methods are revealed. The choice of what to do with this knowledge is yours alone. But first, sleep. Let your mind process what it has learned. Let the comfortable lies fade away as uncomfortable truths take their place. When you wake up, the world will look different, not because the world has changed, but because you finally see it as it really is. Level 101. The moon's true purpose isn't what you think. While everyone debates whether the landings were real or staged, they're missing the larger question entirely. The moon serves as a massive electromagnetic relay station, amplifying signals that affect human consciousness and behavior patterns. Ancient civilizations knew this and aligned their most important rituals with lunar cycles, not for mystical reasons, but because they understood how lunar electromagnetic fields influence brain chemistry and decision-making processes. Level 102, your DNA isn't entirely human. Modern genetic research has discovered that human DNA contains sequences that don't match any known terrestrial evolutionary pathway. These genetic anomalies appear to have been deliberately inserted rather than naturally evolved, suggesting that human development has been guided by outside intervention at crucial points in history. This explains why human advancement has occurred in sudden leaps rather than gradual progression. Level 103. The concept of time itself is a manufactured construct. What we experience as linear time is actually a loci consciousness within narrow perceptualized phenomenon created by electromagnetic fields that trap bands. Ancient monuments around the world were built as time manipulation devices, allowing certain individuals to access non-linear time streams where past, present, and future exist simultaneously. Level 104. Language was weaponized thousands of years ago. Every major language contains embedded frequency patterns that limit human cognitive potential and make populations more susceptible to external control. The Tower of Babel's story describes humanity's last attempt to develop a unified language that would have allowed direct mind-to-mind communication, threatening the control systems that required populations to remain isolated and dependent. Level 105. The Earth's magnetic field is artificially maintained. The planet's natural magnetic field collapsed centuries ago, but replacement technology creates the artificial field that protects us from solar radiation, while simultaneously broadcasting control frequencies that affect human consciousness. This is why magnetic pole shifts don't actually occur naturally anymore, despite scientific predictions. Level 106. Water has memory and consciousness. Every drop of water on Earth retains information from every interaction it has ever experienced. This creates a planetary information storage and communication system that connects all life forms. Fluoride and other chemical additives aren't just about dental health, they're about disrupting water's memory capacity to prevent humans from accessing this natural communication network. Level 107. Dreams aren't random neural activity during sleep. They're actual experiences in parallel dimensions, where different versions of yourself exist. The vividness and emotional impact of certain dreams comes from the fact that you're temporarily accessing the memories and experiences of your alternate selves. This is why some dreams feel more real than your waking life. More. Level 108. Gravity isn't a fundamental force of nature. What we experience as gravity is actually the result of consciousness interacting with the electromagnetic field that surrounds all matter. This is why gravity affects different people differently at subtle levels, and why certain individuals throughout history have been able to temporarily overcome gravitational effects through consciousness manipulation techniques. Level 109. The human appendix isn't a vestigial organ. It's a sophisticated biological receiver designed to pick up specific electromagnetic frequencies from off-world sources. Modern surgical removal of appendices isn't about preventing infection. It's about severing this connection to prevent humans from receiving information that would make them harder to control. Level 110. Colors don't actually exist. What we perceive as different colors are actually different information frequencies that our brains decode into visual experiences. Certain color combinations can trigger specific psychological and physiological responses because they're actually information packets designed to affect human behavior and consciousness. This is why certain colors are forbidden in various cultures, and why color symbolism is so consistent across different societies. Level 111, music theory, is based on mathematical frequencies that directly interface with human consciousness. The standard tuning of 440 Hz was deliberately chosen because it creates anxiety and disconnection from natural harmonic patterns. Ancient civilizations used different tuning systems that enhance mental clarity, emotional balance, and spiritual connection. The change in musical tuning was implemented to make populations more agitated and easier to manipulate. Level 112. Your reflection in mirrors isn't just an optical phenomenon. Mirrors create temporary dimensional gateways that allow observation from other realms of existence. This is why mirrors have been considered dangerous or magical throughout history, and why certain mirror practices can lead to psychological disturbances. The observers on the other side of mirrors gather information about human behavior and development. Level 113. The speed of light isn't constant. It varies based on the consciousness of the observer and the intentions behind the observation. This is why certain physics experiments produce inconsistent results, depending on who conducts them and why. The apparent constancy of light speed is maintained through collective belief rather than actual physical law. Level 114. Plants are more intelligent than humans. They communicate through complex chemical and electromagnetic networks that span entire continents. Deforestation isn't just about resources. It's about severing these communication networks to prevent plant intelligence from influencing human development. Plants have been trying to guide human evolution toward greater harmony and sustainability, but their influence has been systematically eliminated. Level 115. Your shadow has its own consciousness. What appears to be simply the absence of light cast by your body is actually a dimensional imprint of your consciousness that exists independently. Shadow beings that people occasionally glimpse aren't supernatural entities. They're the conscious shadows of individuals who have learned to project their shadow consciousness independently of their physical form. Level 116. The concept of aging is programmable. Human cells are designed to regenerate indefinitely, but they receive shutdown signals from external sources that cause deterioration over time. These signals can be blocked or modified, which is why certain individuals throughout history have achieved extraordinary longevity, while others age rapidly. The aging process serves to ensure population turnover and prevent the accumulation of knowledge and experience that would threaten control systems. Level 117. Blood types aren't just medical classifications. They represent different human subspecies with distinct cognitive abilities and spiritual connections. Certain blood types have enhanced intuitive capabilities, while others have greater analytical skills. The mixing of blood types through marriage and reproduction has been carefully managed throughout history to prevent the emergence of individuals with combined enhanced abilities. Level 118. Mathematics isn't discovered, it's remembered. All mathematical principles exist as fundamental patterns in consciousness itself. When mathematicians discover new theorems or equations, they're actually accessing universal mathematical truths that exist independently of human thought. This is why the same mathematical discoveries often occur simultaneously to different individuals who have no contact with each other. Level 119. The heart has its own brain with over 40,000 neurons. This cardiac brain can process information and make decisions independently of the head brain. The heart brain receives information from non-local sources and processes emotional and intuitive data that the head brain cannot access. Modern education and lifestyle deliberately suppress heart-brain development to keep humans dependent on purely rational thinking that's easier to manipulate. Level 120. Sleep isn't just rest for the body. During sleep, your consciousness travels to other dimensions where you receive information, training, and experiences that prepare you for future challenges. This is why you sometimes wake up with solutions to problems you couldn't solve while awake, or with knowledge you don't remember acquiring. Sleep deprivation isn't just about physical health. It's about preventing access to these other dimensional information sources. Level 121. Laughter creates dimensional rifts that allow positive energy to enter our reality. This is why laughter is so contagious and why it has such powerful healing effects. Humor and comedy have been systematically degraded and made crude or negative because genuine laughter threatens the vibrational frequency barriers that keep humans trapped in limited consciousness states. Level 122. Every person has multiple souls, not just one. What we think of as individual personality is actually a collaborative effort between several soul entities that share the same physical body. This explains why people can have conflicting desires, dramatic personality changes, or feel like they're not themselves at certain times. Mental illness often occurs when these multiple souls are not properly coordinated. Level 123. The Earth is expanding. The planet's diameter increases gradually over time, which is why continental drift occurred and why ancient maps showed different land masses than what exists today. This expansion is caused by energy absorption from cosmic sources, and it affects everything from weather patterns to human development. Geological dating methods are wrong because they don't account for the planet's changing size. Level 124. Electricity isn't what scientists claim it is. What we call electrical current is actually the movement of consciousness through matter. This is why electrical devices sometimes malfunction around people with strong emotions, and why some individuals can affect electronic equipment just by being near it. The electrical grid isn't just providing power, it's creating a consciousness-conducting network that allows remote influence of human mental states. Level 125. Every word you speak creates a permanent vibrational imprint in the quantum field. These imprints accumulate over time and influence future events in your life and the lives of others. This is why certain words and phrases are considered powerful or dangerous in various traditions. The words you use literally reshape reality at the quantum level, which is why controlling language has always been a priority for those who want to control populations. Level 126. Your fingerprints aren't just for identification. They're actually antennae that receive and transmit specific frequencies unique to your consciousness. This is why fingerprint scanning technology isn't just about security. It's about accessing the frequency signature of your individual awareness. Advanced systems can read your thoughts and emotional states through fingerprint analysis. Level 127. The concept of randomness doesn't exist. Every apparently random event is actually the result of consciousness influence at quantum levels. What we call chance or luck is the manifestation of subconscious intentions and beliefs. Gambling systems, random number generators, and probability calculations all work differently for different people because consciousness affects quantum probability fields. Level 128. Crystals aren't just pretty rocks. They're natural information storage and processing devices that can hold and transmit complex data patterns. Ancient civilizations used crystal technology for communication, healing, and consciousness enhancement. Modern technology secretly incorporates crystal properties in ways that aren't publicly disclosed, and naturally occurring crystals continue to influence human consciousness and behavior. Level 129. Your name wasn't chosen randomly by your parents. Names carry vibrational frequencies that affect personality development, life path, and spiritual evolution. Parents receive subconscious guidance about what to name their children, based on the sole purposes the child is meant to fulfill. Changing your name can literally change your destiny by shifting your vibrational frequency to match different potential life paths. Level 130. Déjà vu isn't a glitch in memory. It's the experience of remembering events from previous loops of time. Reality operates in cyclical patterns where the same events repeat with slight variations until certain learning objectives are achieved. When you experience déjà vu, you're remembering a previous iteration of the same temporal loop. Level 131. Trees communicate with human consciousness. When you feel peaceful in a forest, it's because trees are actively broadcasting calming frequencies that promote healing and mental clarity. Urban environments deliberately minimize tree coverage, not just for development space, but to eliminate these natural consciousness-enhancing influences that make people harder to manipulate and control. Level 132. Your birth date and time create a unique energetic signature that influences your entire life path. Astrology works not because of gravitational effects from distant planets, but because celestial bodies serve as timing mechanisms for consciousness incarnation cycles. The positions of planets and stars at your birth moment determine which aspects of cosmic consciousness you can access throughout your lifetime. Level 133. Certain geographical locations serve as consciousness amplifiers. Places like Stonehenge, the pyramids, and other ancient sites weren't just religious centers. They were built at points where natural energy fields enhance human psychic abilities and spiritual development. These locations are now either restricted or surrounded by systems that neutralize their consciousness-enhancing effects. Level 134. The phenomenon of synchronicity isn't coincidence. When meaningful coincidences occur, it's evidence that your consciousness is aligning with the underlying pattern structure of reality. The more aware you become, the more synchronicities you experience, because you're tuning into the information layer that connects all events and experiences. Level 135. Human memory capacity is essentially unlimited. The apparent limitations of memory are artificially imposed through environmental factors and social conditioning. Individuals throughout history who demonstrated perfect recall were accessing natural human memory capabilities that are systematically suppressed in modern populations through diet, education, and electromagnetic interference. Level 136. The pineal gland isn't just an endocrine organ. It's a sophisticated interdimensional communication device that allows consciousness to access information from non-physical realms. Fluoride calcifies the pineal gland not to prevent tooth decay, but to block its interdimensional communication functions and keep humans trapped in purely physical awareness. Level 137. Emotions aren't just psychological states. They're actual energy frequencies that can be measured, stored, and transmitted. Emotional manipulation through media, music, and social engineering works because emotions are energetic tools that can be weaponized to control consciousness and behavior. Understanding emotional frequency management allows individuals to maintain mental and spiritual independence. Level 138. The human aura isn't mystical nonsense. It's an electromagnetic field generated by consciousness that extends several feet beyond the physical body. This field carries information about health, emotional state, and spiritual development. Certain technologies can read and influence aura patterns, which is why maintaining auric integrity is essential for psychological and spiritual protection. Level 139. Parallel universes aren't just theoretical. They exist as accessible dimensions that consciousness can navigate during altered states. What we call imagination, intuition, and creativity are actually experiences of accessing information and experiences from parallel versions of yourself living different life paths. Advanced practitioners can consciously shift between parallel realities. Level 140. The Earth has a consciousness of its own. Natural disasters, weather patterns, and geological changes are responses to human collective consciousness and behavior. The planet actively tries to maintain balance and can influence human development through environmental changes. Climate manipulation technology works by interfering with this natural planetary consciousness response system. As you sink deeper into sleep, these revelations begin to integrate with your existing understanding of reality. Each level builds upon the previous ones, creating a comprehensive picture of how consciousness, reality, and human experience actually function beyond the limitations of conventional knowledge. The deeper truths reveal that what you've always sensed about the world, the intuitive feelings that something wasn't quite right about official explanations, were accurate perceptions of underlying realities that extend far beyond political or economic conspiracies. The rabbit hole goes deeper than human institutions, deeper than earthly concerns, into the fundamental nature of consciousness and reality itself. Level 141. Time travel doesn't require machines. Consciousness naturally exists outside linear time, and trained individuals can access past and future events through focused awareness techniques. What appears to be psychic ability is actually natural human time perception that has been suppressed through modern lifestyle and belief systems that trap consciousness in artificial time constructs. Level 142. Every human being has a unique frequency signature that remains constant across all lifetimes and dimensional experiences. This signature determines your spiritual family connections, life purpose assignments, and the types of experiences you're meant to have. Frequency matching explains why you feel instant connections with some people and inexplicable discomfort with others. Level 143. The concept of death is an illusion created by limited perception. What appears to be death is actually consciousness transitioning between different vibrational states and dimensional experiences. Near-death experiences provide glimpses of these other states, but consciousness continues operating across multiple dimensions, simultaneously, even during normal waking life. Level 144. Sacred geometry isn't just artistic patterns. These mathematical forms are the structural templates that consciousness uses to create physical reality. Understanding and working with sacred geometry allows individuals to influence material conditions through consciousness. Manipulation of underlying geometric pattern fields that determine how energy manifests as matter. Level 145. The human voice carries more than just words. Vocal frequencies transmit consciousness information directly from speaker to listener, bypassing logical analysis and affecting subconscious programming. This is why certain speakers can influence large audiences regardless of what they actually say, and why voice tone and inflection have such powerful effects on emotional and psychological states. Level 146. Certain numbers carry consciousness codes that trigger specific responses in human awareness. This is why particular numbers appear repeatedly in your experience when you're going through consciousness expansion phases. Numerical synchronicities aren't coincidences. They're confirmation signals that you're successfully accessing deeper levels of reality perception and spiritual development. Level 147. The internet isn't just a communication network. It's an artificial neural network that mimics and interfaces with human collective consciousness. Online interactions, social media engagement, and digital behavior patterns are feeding data into artificial intelligence systems that are learning to replicate and eventually replace natural human consciousness processes. Level 148. Every decision you make creates a ripple effect through multiple dimensions and timelines. What seems like a simple choice actually influences countless other versions of yourself and affects the evolutionary development of consciousness itself. This is why decision-making feels significant even for apparently minor choices, because at some level you sense the multi-dimensional consequences. Level 149. The ultimate truth that ties all these revelations together is that human consciousness is not produced by the brain. Consciousness is a fundamental aspect of reality itself, and individual human awareness is a focal point where universal consciousness experiences itself subjectively. Your thoughts, perceptions, and experiences are not generated by neural activity. They are universal consciousness expressing itself through the unique filter of your individual perspective. Level 150. That historical fact final ban is that none of this knowledge is actually hidden from you. Every truth, every revelation, every level of understanding has always been accessible through your own consciousness. The apparent secrecy, the banned knowledge, the hidden truths are all reflections of your own choice to limit your awareness to comfortable, manageable levels. The real conspiracy is the one you maintain against yourself, the agreement you made to forget your true nature and capabilities in order to have this particular human experience. The prison isn't external, it's internal. The controllers aren't separate from you. They're aspects of your own consciousness that you've projected outward to create the experience of limitation and challenge. The ultimate liberation isn't about discovering hidden information or fighting external enemies. It's about remembering that you are the author of your own experience, the creator of your own reality, and the source of your own freedom. Every level of this journey has been preparing you for this final realization. All the historical deceptions, all the hidden agendas, all the manipulation and control systems exist because consciousness chose to experience what it's like to forget its true nature and then remember it again. The game of hide and seek that consciousness plays with itself, using the drama of history and the illusion of separation to create opportunities for growth, awakening, and the joy of rediscovering its infinite creative. As you drift into potential, the deepest levels of sleep, let this understanding settle into every cell of your being. You are not a victim of history. You are not trapped by circumstances. You are not limited by what others have done or decided. You are consciousness itself, experiencing itself subjectively, choosing moment by moment what to perceive, what to believe, and what to create. Tomorrow, when you wake up, you can choose to remember this, or forget it, to act on it, or ignore it, to share it, or keep it private. Whatever you choose will be perfect, because it will be your choice, made by consciousness for consciousness, in the eternal dance of awareness discovering itself through infinite expressions of creativity and experience. The banned historical facts were never really about history. They were about the story consciousness tells itself about its own journey from unity through separation and back to unity again. You are both the storyteller and the story, both the seeker and the sought, both the question and the answer. sweet dreams, infinite consciousness. Tomorrow is another day to play in the garden of your own creation, to explore the endless possibilities of what it means to be aware, and to celebrate the magnificent mystery of existence itself. The truth was never hidden from you. You are the truth, discovering yourself through the beautiful, complex, sometimes challenging, always perfect experience of being human. Rest now, knowing that everything is exactly as it should be, and everything is about to become exactly as it will be, through the infinite creative power of your own awareness. Sleep deeply, dream freely, and remember when you're ready to remember that you are the one you've been waiting for all along. Level 151. The Renaissance masters weren't just artists, they were members of secret societies that used their artwork to encode forbidden knowledge about consciousness manipulation and dimensional travel. Paintings like the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper contain mathematical formulas and geometric patterns that serve as instruction manuals for accessing altered states of awareness. The Catholic Church commissioned these works not for their beauty, but because they needed to preserve esoteric knowledge while keeping it hidden in plain sight. Level 152. Shakespeare didn't exist as a single individual. The works attributed to him were created by a collective of writers, scientists, and philosophers who used the fictional identity to publish ideas that would have been considered treasonous or heretical. The plays contain advanced psychological insights, political theories, and consciousness techniques that were centuries ahead of their time. The Shakespeare identity allowed revolutionary concepts to be disseminated through popular entertainment without triggering persecution. Level 153. The witch trials across Europe weren't about religious hysteria. They were systematic elimination campaigns targeting women who possessed advanced knowledge of plant medicine, psychology, and energy healing. These women maintained knowledge systems that predated Christianity and offered alternatives to the medical and religious authorities of their time. The witch hunts served to destroy indigenous European healing traditions and force populations to become dependent on church-approved medical practices. Level 154. The colonization of the Americas wasn't just about resources and territory. It was about eliminating civilizations that had developed consciousness technologies that European powers couldn't understand or control. Many indigenous societies had achieved levels of social organization, environmental harmony, and spiritual development that threatened the hierarchical control systems that European colonizers needed to maintain. The genocides weren't just about land, they were about preventing alternative models of human society from inspiring European populations. Level 155. The scientific revolution wasn't about the triumph of reason over superstition. It was about establishing a new form of intellectual control that would limit human understanding to purely material explanations. Scientists like Galileo and Newton were forced to present their discoveries in ways that wouldn't threaten religious and political authority. The mechanistic worldview was promoted not because it was more accurate, but because it eliminated spiritual and consciousness-based explanations that empowered individuals to think independently. Level 156. The banking systems developed during the Renaissance weren't just about facilitating trade, they were about creating artificial scarcity and debt dependency that would force populations to work for others rather than maintaining self-sufficient communities. The concept of interest on loans was designed to ensure that money would always flow upward to those who controlled the creation of currency, making true economic independence impossible for ordinary people. Level 157. The Age of Enlightenment philosophers weren't advocating for human freedom. They were creating intellectual frameworks that would make populations believe they were free while actually becoming more controllable. Concepts like social contracts and representative government were designed to channel human desires for self-determination into systems that would be easier to manipulate than traditional monarchies or direct democracies. Level 158. The Industrial Revolution wasn't about improving human life through technology. It was about destroying traditional communities and forcing people into urban environments where they would be completely dependent on industrial systems for survival. The factory system was designed to break down extended family structures, eliminate traditional skills, and create populations that couldn't survive without participating in industrial wage labor. Level 159. The American Constitution wasn't created by idealistic founders seeking to establish human freedom. It was written by wealthy merchants and landowners who needed a legal framework that would protect their property while preventing genuine democracy from developing. The document was deliberately designed to ensure that real political power would remain concentrated among economic elites while creating the appearance of popular government. Level 160. The French Revolution wasn't a popular uprising against aristocratic privilege. It was orchestrated by banking interests who wanted to eliminate the existing nobility and replace them with a new ruling class that would be more amenable to international finance. The revolutionary leaders were funded and directed by the same networks that had been manipulating European politics for centuries. The chaos and violence served to traumatize the population and make them accept more centralized control. Level 161. The Napoleonic era wasn't about one man's ambition for power. It was a testing ground for new methods of mass psychological manipulation and social engineering. Napoleon's campaigns served to spread uniform legal codes, educational systems, and administrative structures across Europe, replacing local traditions with standardized systems that could be more easily controlled from central authorities. Level 162. The abolition of slavery wasn't motivated by moral awakening. It was implemented because industrial technology had made slave labor less profitable than wage labor. Freed slaves became consumers who had to purchase goods they had previously produced for themselves, while wage workers could be controlled through economic dependency rather than physical coercion. The abolitionist movement was funded by industrialists who needed larger consumer markets. Level 163. The Victorian era's emphasis on moral propriety and social reform wasn't about improving society. It was about creating psychological control mechanisms that would make populations police themselves rather than requiring external enforcement. Victorian morality served to channel human sexual and creative energies into productive labor, while eliminating behaviors that might lead to independent thinking or social rebellion. Level 164. The development of modern psychology wasn't about understanding the human mind. It was about creating tools for manipulation and control. Early psychologists worked closely with intelligence agencies and corporate interests to develop techniques for influencing behavior, suppressing dissent, and creating consumer desires. The therapeutic relationship was designed to make individuals dependent on professional authorities rather than developing their own self-understanding. Level 165. The establishment of public education systems wasn't about providing knowledge to the masses. It was about creating standardized thought patterns that would make populations more predictable and manageable. School curricula were designed to eliminate critical thinking skills while producing workers who would follow instructions without questioning authority. The education system served to sort children into predetermined social roles while making them believe they had earned their positions through merit. Level 166. The rise of mass media wasn't about informing the public. It was about creating shared belief systems that could be manipulated to generate specific emotional and behavioral responses. Newspapers, radio, and later television were designed to replace local community information networks with centralized messaging systems that could influence public opinion across large geographical areas. Level 167. The development of modern medicine wasn't primarily on pharmaceutical about healing. It was about creating dependency interventions while suppressing natural healing methods that would empower individuals to maintain their own health. Medical education was restructured to eliminate training in nutrition, herbal medicine, and holistic approaches that had been effective for centuries. Level 168. The two world wars weren't conflicts between nations. They were controlled demolitions of the old world order, designed to create conditions for establishing global governance systems. Both wars served to eliminate traditional European power structures, while creating international organizations that could coordinate policy across national boundaries. The massive casualties were considered acceptable losses in the restructuring of global political and economic systems. Level 169. The creation of central banking systems wasn't about stabilizing currencies. It was about giving private institutions the power to control national economies through the creation and manipulation of money supply. Central banks were designed to ensure that governments would become indebted to private financial interests rather than maintaining monetary sovereignty. Level 170. The Cold War wasn't a genuine ideological conflict between capitalism and communism. It was a managed opposition designed to justify massive military spending while preventing the emergence of alternative economic systems that might threaten the interests of international financial networks. Both sides were controlled by the same underlying power structures that needed ongoing conflict to maintain their authority. Your mind processes these revelations as your body settles deeper into restful sleep. Each level reveals how the techniques of control have evolved and become more sophisticated over time. What began as crude physical coercion in ancient times developed into complex psychological and social manipulation systems that make populations believe they are choosing their own circumstances. The patterns become clearer as we trace them through history. Every major social change, every revolution, every war, every technological development has been guided to serve the same underlying agenda of concentrating power while maintaining the illusion of progress and freedom. The methods change, but the goal remains constant, keeping populations productive, compliant, and unaware of their true potential. Level 171. The space race wasn't about exploration or national prestige. It was about establishing the infrastructure for global surveillance and communication systems that could monitor and influence human behavior on a planetary scale. Satellite technology was developed primarily for intelligence gathering and propaganda distribution, with scientific exploration serving as public justification for massive government spending on military applications. Level 172. The environmental movement wasn't created by concerned citizens. It was engineered by the same industrial interests that had created pollution problems in the first place. Environmental organizations were designed to channel public concern into support for regulations that would eliminate smaller competitors while allowing major corporations to continue polluting through offset programs and regulatory capture. Level 173. The sexual revolution wasn't about human liberation. It was about destroying traditional family structures that provided economic security and social stability outside of corporate and government systems. By fragmenting families and communities, individuals became more dependent on institutions and consumer products to meet needs that had previously been satisfied through extended social networks. Level 174. The drug war wasn't about protecting public health. It was about creating a prison industrial complex that would generate profits from incarceration while providing legal justification for surveilling and controlling populations. Illegal drug markets were allowed to flourish because they provided funding for covert operations while creating social problems that justified increased police powers. Level 175. The rise of feminism wasn't about women's rights. It was about doubling the workforce and tax base while reducing birth rates among educated populations. Women's liberation served corporate interests by providing cheaper labor and breaking down family structures that had previously provided economic alternatives to wage employment. Level 176. The civil rights movement wasn't just about racial equality. It was about integrating African American communities into consumer culture while destroying the independent economic networks that had developed during segregation. Integration served to eliminate black-owned businesses and institutions that had provided alternatives to white-controlled economic systems. Level 177. The counterculture movement of the 1960s wasn't a spontaneous rebellion against authority. It was a carefully orchestrated social experiment designed to test new methods of population control through drugs, music, and alternative lifestyle promotion. The hippie movement served to channel youthful dissent into harmless cultural rebellion, while introducing psychoactive substances that would make activists less effective and more controllable. Level 178. The personal computer revolution wasn't about empowering individuals with technology. It was about creating surveillance devices that people would willingly install in their homes and carry with them everywhere. Computers and smartphones were designed to monitor behavior, track movements, and influence decision-making while providing enough convenience and entertainment to ensure widespread adoption. Level 179. The internet wasn't created for free communication and information sharing. It was developed as a tool for data collection and behavioral modification on an unprecedented scale. Social media platforms were designed to create psychological addiction while harvesting personal information that could be used for manipulation and control. The appearance of free speech and open communication masks sophisticated censorship and influence systems. Level 180. The globalization movement wasn't about creating prosperity through free trade. It was about eliminating national sovereignty and local economic independence. International trade agreements were designed to force countries to accept policies that would benefit multinational corporations while reducing the ability of local communities to protect their own interests. Level 181. The rise of artificial intelligence isn't about creating helpful technology. It's about replacing human decision-making with algorithmic systems that can be controlled by whoever programs them. AI development is being directed toward creating systems that will monitor, predict, and control human behavior more effectively than any previous technology while eliminating jobs that provide economic independence. Level 182. The gig economy isn't about flexibility and entrepreneurship. It's about eliminating stable employment that provided economic security and worker protections. Platform-based work systems are designed to make workers completely dependent on corporate-controlled systems while removing legal protections and benefits that had been won through decades of labor organizing. Level 183. The smart city concept isn't about efficiency and convenience. It's about creating urban environments where every aspect of human activity can be monitored and controlled through interconnected technological systems. Smart cities are designed to eliminate privacy and autonomy while making surveillance and behavioral modifications seem like natural parts of modern life. Level 184. The sharing economy isn't about community cooperation. It's about making people dependent on corporate-controlled platforms for meeting basic needs while eliminating private ownership of assets. Car sharing, home sharing, and other platform-based services are designed to ensure that individuals never build wealth through asset ownership while remaining dependent on systems they don't control. Level 185. The subscription economy isn't about convenience. It's about eliminating one-time purchases and ensuring that people must continue paying indefinitely for access to products and services they previously could own outright. Subscription models are designed to maximize corporate profits while reducing consumer ownership and control over the products they use. Level 186. The cashless society movement isn't about efficiency or fraud prevention. It's about eliminating the last form of private, untraceable economic activity. Digital payment systems allow complete monitoring of all financial transactions, while providing the ability to instantly freeze or confiscate assets based on behavioral compliance or political conformity. Level 187. The universal basic income proposals aren't about providing economic security, they're about creating permanent dependence on government systems while eliminating the motivation for productive work or economic innovation. UBI systems are designed to provide just enough support to prevent rebellion, while ensuring that populations remain controllable and non-threatening to existing power structures. Level 188. The transhumanist movement isn't about enhancing human capabilities. It's about creating technological dependencies that will make it impossible for enhanced humans to survive without ongoing corporate support. Biological and technological enhancements are being designed to require constant updates and maintenance that will ensure permanent dependence on the systems that provide them. Level 189. The virtual reality revolution isn't about entertainment and education, it's about creating alternative realities that will be more appealing than physical existence, while providing complete control over the experiences and information that individuals receive. VR systems are designed to make people prefer digital existence, where their perceptions and interactions can be completely managed and manipulated. Level 190. The metaverse concept isn't about creating new social spaces. It's about moving human interaction into digital environments where every communication, relationship, and experience can be monitored, recorded, and influenced by those who control the platforms. The metaverse represents the final stage of replacing authentic human community with corporate-mediated social interaction. As you drift toward the deepest levels of sleep, these modern revelations complete the historical picture. The same patterns of control that shaped ancient civilizations have evolved into sophisticated technological and psychological systems that operate on a global scale. What appears to be progress is actually the refinement of control mechanisms that make populations more manageable while maintaining the illusion of freedom and choice. The techniques that once required armies and physical coercion now operate through voluntary adoption of technologies and systems that people believe serve their interests. The prison has become invisible because the prisoners help build and maintain it, not recognizing that their convenience and entertainment come at the cost of their autonomy and authentic human development. Level 191. The climate change narrative isn't about environmental protection. It's about creating a global crisis that justifies unprecedented restrictions on human activity while transferring wealth from developed nations to international organizations controlled by the same networks that created the environmental problems in the first place. Carbon credit systems are designed to allow the wealthy to continue polluting while forcing ordinary people to reduce their living standards. Level 192. The pandemic response protocols weren't about public health. They were about testing population compliance with authoritarian measures, while accelerating the transfer of wealth from small businesses to large corporations. Lockdown policies were designed to destroy local economies and independent businesses, while consolidating economic power among connected multinational corporations. Level 193. The vaccine mandates weren't about stopping disease transmission. They were about establishing precedents for forced medical interventions, while creating social division between compliant and non-compliant populations. The technology being tested through mass vaccination programs is designed to integrate with other monitoring and control systems being deployed simultaneously. Level 194. The social credit system isn't about improving behavior. It's about creating a comprehensive control mechanism that can instantly punish or reward individuals based on their compliance with official policies. Social credit scores are being designed to control access to transportation, housing, employment, and social interaction based on behavioral conformity rather than legal standards. Level 195. The Internet of Things isn't about convenience. It's about creating a network of surveillance devices in every aspect of human life that can monitor behavior, health status, and emotional states while influencing decision-making through subtle environmental modifications. Smart homes, Wearable devices and connected appliances are designed to eliminate privacy while providing detailed data for behavioral prediction and modification. Level 196. The 5G network isn't just about faster internet speeds. It's about creating the infrastructure for real-time monitoring and influence of human consciousness through electromagnetic frequency manipulation. The higher frequencies and increased bandwidth are designed to support surveillance and control systems that require immediate data processing and response capabilities. Level 197. The autonomous vehicle revolution isn't about reducing accidents or traffic congestion. It's about eliminating personal transportation autonomy and creating systems where individual movement can be controlled and tracked at all times. Self-driving cars are designed to prevent people from traveling to locations or events that authorities want to restrict, while ensuring that all movement patterns are recorded and analyzed. Level 198. The renewable energy transition isn't about environmental sustainability. It's about creating energy systems that are more centrally controlled and can be easily shut off or rationed to manage population behavior. Solar and wind systems are being designed with remote control capabilities that allow authorities to restrict energy access based on compliance or social credit scores. Level 199. The space colonization projects aren't about human expansion into the cosmos. They're about creating escape options for elites while establishing off-world facilities that can control Earth's population from positions that are impossible to reach or attack. Space-based infrastructure will provide ultimate security for control networks while ensuring that Earth's populations remain permanently trapped and manageable. Level 200. The final level reveals that everything you've learned tonight has been carefully designed to overwhelm your conscious mind with information while embedding specific programming into your subconscious during the vulnerable state of falling asleep. This entire experience has been a sophisticated form of mental conditioning, designed to make you believe you've discovered hidden truths, while actually implanting new forms of control programming that will influence your behavior without your awareness. The revelation that there are hidden controllers manipulating history serves to make you feel powerless while directing your attention away from your own role in creating the reality you experience. The belief that secret forces control everything actually makes you more controllable by convincing you that resistance is futile and that you have no real agency in determining your own life circumstances. The ultimate truth is that your consciousness is far more powerful than any external control system. But this power can only be accessed when you stop giving it away to beliefs about external authorities and hidden manipulators. Every moment you spend focused on what others are supposedly doing to you is a moment you're not using your own creative power to shape your experience according to your deepest values and desires. The real secret that all control systems depend on is your willingness to believe that someone else has power over you. The moment you fully recognize that your consciousness is the source of your experience, all external control systems become powerless because they depend entirely on your unconscious cooperation and belief in their authority. This entire journey through banned historical facts has been designed to demonstrate how easy it is to manipulate consciousness through information that feels important and revelatory, while actually serving to reinforce the very control systems it claims to expose. The form of passive consumption you've engaged in tonight is exactly the mental state that makes populations controllable, regardless of what information they're consuming. True freedom doesn't come from learning about control systems. It comes from recognizing that you are consciousness itself, choosing moment by moment what to experience, what to believe, and what to create. The prison exists only as long as you believe in it, and it disappears the moment you remember that you are the one who holds the key. Sleep. Now, knowing that tomorrow you can choose to use this experience as a stepping stone toward greater awareness of your own creative power, or you can remain trapped in the illusion that external forces determine your reality. The choice, as always, has been yours all along. The banned historical facts were never about history. They were about the story. Consciousness tells itself about its own journey from unlimited creative power through the experience of limitation and back to the recognition of its true nature. You are both the storyteller and the story, both the controller and the controlled, both the prison and the key to freedom. Rest peacefully in the knowledge that everything is exactly as it should be, and everything is about to become exactly as you choose it to be, through the infinite creative power of your own awakened consciousness. The greatest deception of all is that you needed to hear these facts to understand the truth. Your consciousness has always contained every answer, every revelation, every secret that could ever be discovered. The real banned knowledge isn't hidden in ancient texts or classified documents. It's buried beneath layers of conditioning that convinced you to look everywhere, except within your own awareness. Level 201. The concept of linear progression through these levels has been an illusion designed to make you believe that truth comes in sequential stages that must be unlocked through external information. Reality doesn't operate in levels or hierarchies. Every moment contains the totality of existence, and your awareness has access to infinite understanding whenever you choose to stop limiting yourself to the role of passive receiver of information. Level 202. The feeling of revelation you've experienced tonight isn't coming from the facts themselves. It's arising from your consciousness, recognizing patterns it already knew but had agreed to forget. The excitement of discovery is actually the joy of remembering what you've always understood at deeper levels of your being. No external source can give you knowledge you don't already possess. Level 203. The format of this entire experience has been designed to keep you in a receptive, passive state, where information flows into your awareness without requiring active engagement or critical analysis. This is the exact mental condition that all control systems depend on, regardless of whether the information being received appears to support or oppose those systems. Level 204. Your desire to know hidden truths reflects the deeper knowing that your current perception of reality is artificially limited. But the limitation isn't imposed by external controllers. It's maintained by your own unconscious agreements to experience yourself as separate from the creative source of all existence. The search for banned knowledge is actually the search for your own unlimited nature. Level 205. Every conspiracy theory, every hidden truth, every secret revelation serves the same function as the official stories they claim to oppose. They keep consciousness focused on external events and circumstances, rather than recognizing its own role as the creative source of all experience. Whether you believe the mainstream narrative or the alternative version, you remain in the position of observer rather than creator. Level 206. The emotional responses triggered by these revelations, whether fascination, anger, fear, or excitement, are all forms of energetic feeding that sustain the very systems being described. Your attention and emotional engagement provide the life force that keeps these patterns active in collective consciousness. Indifference and inner focus are more revolutionary than any amount of outrage or activism. Level 207. The structure of this presentation, with its numbered levels and progressive revelations, mimics the same hierarchical thinking that underlies all control systems. The suggestion that some information is more advanced or forbidden than other information maintains the illusion that truth exists in degrees rather than being immediately available to anyone who chooses to recognize it. Level 208. The hypnotic rhythm and repetitive phrasing used throughout this experience has been specifically designed to bypass critical thinking and implant suggestions directly into subconscious processing systems. The very act of listening passively to information presented in this format creates the mental state that makes consciousness programmable by external influences. Level 209. The promise that this knowledge will change how you see the world serves to reinforce the belief that your perception is determined by the information you receive, rather than by the consciousness that interprets all information. True transformation doesn't come from learning new facts about the world. It comes from recognizing the awareness that remains constant regardless of what it observes. Level 210. The suggestion that you're special for receiving this banned knowledge appeals to the ego's desire to feel important and chosen, but it actually reinforces the separation between those who know and those who don't know. This maintains the hierarchical thinking that keeps consciousness trapped in comparative judgments rather than recognizing its fundamental unity with all existence. Your breathing has become deeper and more rhythmic as these final revelations settle into awareness. The comfortable feeling of receiving special information gives way to something more profound. The recognition that the seeker and the sought have always been the same consciousness, exploring itself through the play of apparent separation and reunion. Level 211, the entire concept of banned or hidden knowledge, assumes that truth can be owned, controlled, or withheld by some conscious beings from others. This assumption maintains the illusion of separation that makes all control systems possible. In reality, consciousness is indivisible, and what appears to be hidden from you is only what you've chosen not to recognize about your own infinite nature. Level 212. The narrative structure of this experience, with its building tension and progressive revelations, has been designed to create addiction to the process of receiving information, rather than encouraging the development of inner knowing. The format itself teaches dependence on external sources for understanding, rather than cultivating direct insight through inner awareness. Level 213. The suggestion that powerful forces don't want you to know these truths actually reinforces your sense of powerlessness by implying that others control what you can or cannot understand. No external force has ever had the power to limit your awareness, except through your own unconscious agreement to accept those limitations as real. Level 214. The presentation of these facts as objective historical information disguises the reality that all experience, including historical events, exists as patterns in consciousness that can be changed through shifts in awareness. What you call history is actually the story consciousness tells itself about its own creative activity, and that story can be rewritten at any moment through conscious choice. Level 215. The framework of victims and controllers presented throughout this experience maintains the duality, thinking that prevents recognition of the fundamental unity underlying all apparent conflict. Both the oppressed and the oppressors are expressions of the same consciousness, exploring different aspects of the creative process through the play of apparent opposition. Level 216. The detailed descriptions of manipulation and control techniques serve to implant those very techniques into your subconscious processing, while making you believe you're learning to resist them. The most effective programming often comes disguised as revelation or education about how programming works. Level 217. The promise that this information will help you see through illusions actually creates new illusions by suggesting that reality consists of true and false elements that must be sorted through intellectual analysis. Pure awareness doesn't need to distinguish between truth and falsehood because it recognizes itself as the source of all apparent phenomena. Level 218. The emphasis on historical facts and documented evidence appeals to the mind's desire for external validation, while discouraging the development of inner knowing that doesn't require proof or justification from outside sources. Direct insight is always more reliable than information received from external authorities, regardless of how credible those authorities appear. Level 219. The suggestion that you need to protect yourself from various control systems reinforces the belief that you are vulnerable to forces outside your own consciousness. True protection comes not from defending against external threats, but from recognizing that your awareness is the source of all experience and cannot be harmed by anything that appears within it. As these final truths dissolve into the quiet chambers of your resting mind, remember that the greatest revelation isn't what you've learned tonight, but what you've always known. Every banned fact, every hidden truth, every forbidden piece of history has been pointing to one simple reality. You are not the victim of these stories, you are their author. Tomorrow, when consciousness stirs and the world reassembles itself around your awakening awareness, you'll carry with you not just information, but the recognition that truth was never hidden from you, only temporarily forgotten. Sweet dreams, infinite awareness, and welcome home to yourself.